Today we continue on with our 2021 NHL season previews. We're now taking a look at the Ottawa Senators. Is the rebuild over? Will it be more competitive? Can they surprise some people this year? We'll discuss that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're doing a season preview for the Ottawa Senators. We've already completed the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, so if you have already missed that, certainly check out the playlist that will be created and pinned down below in the top comments. How we're going to format this video, we're going to do a quick recap here of last season's results. Then we're going to take a look at what their off-season objectives were. Then we're going to take a look at their additions and subtractions to see how they met those objectives. And then we're going to take a look at some key players. So who are the bounce back, breakthrough, and uncertain future type of players to discuss who needs to come up big for them to make some progress this year. And of course, I'll also give you my thoughts on how I feel they will finish the season. Now, first up, let's take a look at last season's results. Of course, as we know, the Senators had another poor performance last year with the results of 25, 34, and 12 for 62 points, near the bottom of the NHL. They ended up with two really high first-round picks in the 2020 NHL draft, which could really help cement this team that much further into the future here. Of course, they had their own first-rounder, which ended up being number 5 overall, in that of the first-rounder for the San Jose Sharks, which they acquired from the Erik Karlsson trade, giving them the number 3 overall pick, where they drafted Tim Stuetzle and Jake Sanderson. So last year was not pretty for the Senators. The past 3 years they've been pretty much at the bottom of the NHL, lost couple spots in the league. So clearly, according to GM Pierre Dorion and Eugene Melnyk, the owner, they made a lot of comments this offseason that it was time to take some steps forward. They've been rebuilding for about 3 years, and now they want to be ready to move on. So let's take a look at what their objectives were to kind of help make that happen. Now, of course, as we know, like I said, the Senators had to address goaltending. They knew that longtime NHL goaltender Craig Anderson, who's arguably their most successful and best goaltender they've ever had in franchise history, was coming at the end of his contract. We knew he very likely wasn't going to be renewed. He was certainly getting up there in age, had certainly regressed in his performance the last few years, and they were ready to move on. As thankful as they were for everything he's done for the organization, it was time to find the next starting goaltender. They had lots of goaltenders in the system, but obviously they needed to address that and really solidify the position moving forward. Now, of course, besides that, they also wanted to be more competitive and certainly harder to play against. So they wanted to be a more competitive team. They're tired of all the losing, and it's time to step forward out of the rebuild. They also wanted to bring in some more veteran players and add some more veteran leadership, and they also wanted to have those same players kind of be around to push the young players and kind of create more of a competitive training camp. Even the guys that were, basically guaranteed to make the team, and a lot of the younger players, they wanted to make sure there was lots of competition, that they would have to have a very competitive camp to get their spot and to get their opportunity. Now, let's take a look at all the additions and subtractions with all the moves that they made to accomplish that, because it's a long list. They certainly were one of the busier teams across the NHL. All kinds of new faces and familiar faces no longer with the franchise. Now, on the subtractions list, we had basically the normal goaltending tandem last year. Craig Anderson and Anders Nilsson both gone. Of course, Nilsson didn't play a ton last year, battling concussion-like problems. Hogberg had a pretty good opportunity last year, but both their main goaltenders from the last couple of years no longer with the franchise. They also said goodbye to longtime defenseman Mark Borieski, which was a bit of a surprise. I thought he might be one of the veteran guys they keep around in another short-term deal. Sounded like they were only willing to give him maybe a 1-year deal, and he was able to get a little bit more term by signing in Nashville. Of course, they also said goodbye to veteran defenseman Ron Hainsey, who played last year just on a 1-year contract. Of course, they also bought out longtime forward Bobby Ryan. As much as Bobby Ryan was a very likable guy and somebody who was, kind of a bit of an enigma with the fans, really. Like, there were times when he was beloved, and there was times when he was certainly not very well liked because he wasn't living up to his contract, but Bobby Ryan had a lot of injuries, had a lot of personal things going on in his life. He conquered a lot of those personal things last year, but up to the end of the day, never really lived up to the contract, never lived up to the hype, and they decided to buy him out of the remaining time in the deal, and were ready to move on. Of course, he went on to sign with the Red Wings. Of course, veteran forward Mikhail Bodker, which we knew was not a big surprise. He didn't play a lot last year. He's not back. They also didn't sign Anthony Duclair, which was a bit of a surprise. Duclair was a free agent, decided to represent himself, and certainly played hardball when he wanted for a contract. And I guess we'll see how that works out with the Florida Panthers. Ottawa was willing to sign him from what we've been hearing, but nowhere near the money he was able to get from Florida. So we'll see how that works out, if it was in the Senators' best interest to move on or if the Panthers overpaid. I guess we'll find out here in due time. And of course, tough guy Scott Sabourin, also no longer with the franchise either, had a limited role last year, battled some injuries, and now he's signed with the Maple Leafs. He'll likely be a part of their American Hockey League franchise. But now let's jump over to the additions list, which is even a little bit longer than the subtractions. Lots of new faces in Ottawa this year, including goaltender Matt Murray, who they made a pretty big acquisition and splash from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course, they acquired the former Stanley Cup winning goaltender who beat them in Game 7 in the 2017 Eastern Conference Finals. They've had lots of battles against this guy, and they know what he's capable of. So hopefully he can bring back that level of play with Ottawa after some inconsistent play, we'll say, over the past 1 to 2 years with the Penguins organization. But that's certainly a long way to solidify the goaltending situation. They also made several free agent acquisitions and some other trades. On the free agent front, they signed winger Evgeny Dadonov from the Florida Panthers, who was a bit of a surprise signing, to be honest. He should be able to give them 20-25 goals for sure. Dadonov, certainly, I think, one of the more underrated wingers across the NHL. Very productive guy. They brought in former Hab Alex Galchenyuk, who they played against quite a bit during his time in Montreal. So we'll see if he can get things back on track. Ever since he's left Montreal, he's been a bit of a journeyman, bouncing around, not really being able to find his game like he had that 30-goal season with the Habs. So we'll see how that works out. But a short-term contract, not really any risk there. Of course, they traded for Derek Stepan from the Coyotes. Stepan is expected to likely get a top 6 role, really be a veteran guy. Stepan is a good leader, somebody who's known to really be good with younger players as well. And they really wanted to insulate the young players and provide some veteran leadership, as I mentioned. Many of their leaders who are going to be their team's captains and assistant captains moving forward will all be pretty young. They needed somebody who could provide that, and Stepan is a guy who can. I mean, obviously they can handle his cap hit for this year. He's only on a 1-year contract, so again, not much risk in that. They also brought in a couple of players from Tampa with Braden Coburn on defense and Cedric Paquette. They obviously helped the Lightning out of a bit of a cap jam, sending them some of their LTIR contracts, including Marian Gaborik, who I guess I could have included on the subtractions, but didn't really feel necessary since he hasn't played in so long, as well as Anders Nilsson. Of course, they also acquired Eric Branson, who's going to be an alternate captain for them this year as well. They acquired Austin Watson from the Nashville Predators. They signed Artem Zub, who's a defenseman coming over from Russia. And of course, they got Tim Stuetzle, or Timmy Superstar, as many people are starting to call him. He had a terrific World Junior Tournament, number 3 overall from Germany. Stuetzle will be able to play towards the end of camp after he completes his isolation quarantine phase after arriving from the World Junior Tournament. But he had a terrific showing, one of the top players, not only for his country, but in the entire tournament. Of course, the number 5 overall pick, Jake Sanderson, will be playing college hockey and won't be jumping to the pro level for at least another season. I mean, although many feel he could play as early as next year, because he is ready. Just a matter of what he decides to do when it comes to his education and when he wants to make that jump. But that's your long list of Ottawa Senators additions and acquisitions that they made for this past year. So it's going to be a very different looking roster. Of course, we're going to have a lot of young players continue to get opportunities as well. You're bound to get guys like Logan Brown, really needs to come up big for the Sens this year, needs to really find himself a spot. He's been in this organization now for quite some time. You got Drake Batherson, you got Josh Norris, you got Alex Formanton, all these guys battling for spots here. Philip Schlappick, another guy who's been around in the system for some time. Brandstrom on the back end. You get Christian Merland. So they have a lot of young players that appear to be really ready for spots, and they're going to have to battle out with a lot of these veteran guys for these regular spots and see what they can do. Of course, with the taxi squads, they'll be able to carry some of these waiver-exempt players, especially the younger guys, on that taxi squad and move them in and out of the lineup. But they're going to need a bigger roster than usual because of everything and the unique season that's ahead of us here. So certainly the Sens are a very, very different-looking team, not only on the ice, but with their new jerseys as well, which I know many fans were quite happy about, going back to the 2D logo. Now, next up, I want to take a look at some players who I'd qualify as some bounce-back candidates, players who need to come up big for the Senators in order for them to really move forward and succeed this year. We're going to take a look at a guy like Matt Murray, for example. Like I said, he's been inconsistent the past couple of years in Pittsburgh. He's due to bounce back and get back to that Stanley Cup winning form. His play is going to be crucial for them. Obviously, he's going to be expected to carry the bulk of the workload. They're likely going to go with Holberg as the backup, would be my guess. Joey Decord's probably going to be your number 3. And obviously, they'll likely want to get all of their young guys a little bit of a taste of the NHL to see what they might have moving forward. But obviously, Murray going to be the main guy and expected to be a big part of the team if he can get back to playing like he did a few years back. Now, of course, when it comes to bounce-back players, I'm going to throw Derek Stepan in there as well. I don't expect him to bounce back to putting up the numbers like he did back when he was with the Rangers, for example, but he's certainly has his offensive numbers have been down in Arizona, which is not a huge surprise. They've been a very low-scoring team down there. The way their systems work and the way they play, it just was not conducive to putting up a whole lot of offensive points. Even guys like Phil Kessel, Taylor Hall, who were more offensively gifted than Stepan, even struggled to put up point totals, and we saw declines there as well. Obviously, Stepan's a guy that needs to get back to playing at a higher level if he's really going to fill that need what the Senators are looking for here to be a top 6 or top 9 center and really provide that leadership and guidance to a lot of the other young center icemen here on the team. Now, as far as who's going to be some breakthrough players for this team, I'm really looking towards Colin White. And Colin White's a player who's been getting rave reviews so far in training camp from head coach DJ Smith. He's a player who, like a Thomas Chabot, been around the organization for some time. Got a longer-term deal, but then last year, we really saw some regression there. He's battled some injuries. He's been not really developed to the point that many people in the organization thought he would. But this is a year, like I said, you can throw Logan Brown into this conversation as well. Those two guys are, many thought could be the number 1, number 2 centers for this franchise. And they're at a point now that even after being drafted for a fair bit of time, they don't even play center on a regular basis, and Logan Brown's case doesn't even play in the NHL on a regular basis. At least White has been a fairly regular NHL player over the past 1.5 to 2 years. But at the end of the day, they both need to take steps forward. White's, like I said, looks really good in training camp, and we'll see if he can progress that and take that with him into the regular season. Of course, you could probably throw Tim Stuetzle in there as well. Not sure how he's going to be used this year, but he does appear to be NHL ready. He was very dominant at the World Junior Championship Tournament. And everybody you listen to talk about him certainly feels he's ready to make a jump to the NHL and be an impact player. So we'll see if he can break through for the Sens this year as well. As far as uncertain future for players on this team, you're going to look to a guy like Artem Anisimov. You have to wonder where he's going to fit in on this roster. At the same time, he has been getting good reviews in training camp as well. They have more than enough capable center icemen on this team, which certainly, to a degree, is a good problem to have, but it does give me some concern about how much opportunity the younger players will be given. So overall, I do feel the Senators have done a pretty good job in addressing their offseason objectives. They got a lot of veterans in camp here to compete with their young players to make things a more competitive camp, which therefore should make them a more competitive team. They have a good spread out amount now of experience mixed in with these young players. So I do think they're going to be harder to play against. I do think they're going to be a very, much more competitive team. Even last year, even though they lost a lot of hockey games, they didn't get beaten really, really badly a lot. They had a lot of games that they were hanging around and made it close and made it interesting at least. And I think this year they can continue to do that, except win a few more of those games. In a really, really tough Canadian division, I'm not sure they're going to really be able to make a ton of progress and end up finishing, top 3 or 4 to make the playoffs. But I would not be completely shocked if they didn't finish last either. I do think this is a team that have a lot of unpredictable pieces right now that we don't know how things are going to go, because there's a lot of new faces, and it's hard to say what the chemistry is going to be like, and it's hard to say what level of play you're going to get, but I like what they've done, and I would not be shocked if they don't finish last. At the same time, though, as I mentioned, my only real concern is the opportunities for these young kids. I hope that they give them plenty of opportunities and playing time. Obviously, these veterans are good to have around. I just don't want to see them box out any of the young talent, so they really need to take some developmental steps this year. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Senators and where you think they'll finish for the upcoming season in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.